I see some faces I know, and I see some faces that I haven't seen before, although I believe I've heard all the names. My name's Bill. I'm married to Lynda, which is a great joy in my life. And she asked me to be the host this evening. And I was thinking about it earlier today. Witnessing the birth of this book, of Grace Reflected. And I've had a front row seat. And it's been a wonder watching as the poems kind of came to life. And I don't know the exact process that Lynda uses, but I know she listens and has her way of finding the words. But then also watching the process of making the decisions about what poems to include and what poems to not include and how to sequence them and how they fit together. And watched it shift numerous times before the actual structure of the book was settled on. But it was a great joy to watch that and witness that and see it up close as it happened. But just a couple of details before we get too far into this. We are recording this, just so you are aware that that's happening. And this is also on Facebook Live as we go forward. Jessica and Lucy, who are Lynda's daughters, are monitoring the chats and those areas. If you have a poem that you would like read, or if you have questions for Lynda, that will be the way to get them to her. They will let us know what they see. And
or when we pause, you can.
Or when we pause, yes.
Ask questions.
And we will take your questions or your comments. But I think everyone here knows Lynda, but I just want to say that Lynda literally walked into my life. I guess that was 2008. At that time, I was hosting house concerts here where we are currently living and soon be leaving. And she attended with her girls. It was Jessica's birthday, as I recall. So she made the choice to come out. And
so she takes all the credit.
Yes, she does. But it's always been a joy. It has been a joy to know Lynda and walk this journey with her. She's a very creative spirit. And I think that shows up in the writing that she does. And she's got the biggest heart I've ever found and encountered. And that shows up in all of her work. So I will just say, Miss Lynda Allen, this is your celebration of the labor that you have gone through to produce these words for the world to read and know. So I'm going to pass the baton back to you for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the labor of love for Grace Reflected, and there's Gracie in the background too. I'm going to just start with a poem, and then we can talk a little bit about the book, but I'm going to start with one that Bill actually wanted me to read, called Nudes. I much prefer spring and summer, with their color, warmth, and light. Yet as I look to the trees at the edge of the field, I feel an unexpected sorrow, knowing that soon much of their form will be hidden, clothed once again in green. Only now do I see them as graceful nudes, hung across the gallery of the sky. I have been walking among the pathways of the world's greatest art museum. seen the artist's finest masterpieces, and until this moment had not learned to appreciate the technique and style of his brushstrokes. As if my newly awakened eyes caused the models to become self-conscious and modest, I can almost see them reaching for their verdant robes. Voyeur or not, I will enjoy their naked forms a while longer before they are brushed once again by spring. So nature obviously is one of my great inspirations. And Gracie, my friend the swan, her energy is woven throughout the entire collection, but the picture itself, you know, I went back and forth on a variety of pictures of swans. I searched all over for one for the cover. The pictures inside are ones that I took, but I needed something for the cover. And this one I kept coming back to, and I kept coming back to, and I kept thinking, well, I mean, is it too stark, you know, with the black and the white like that? But it just, every time I looked at it, felt like the right picture. And then I was in a class with Em actually, and was talking about the cover, and all of a sudden the words started coming out about why it's the right cover. Just the colors, the starkness of the black and the white, in a couple of ways, address the darkness and the light of the journey, but also part of the book addresses social justice. And so it, for me, also represents the issue we have with racism between Black and white in our country. There's also the reflective element of it, that a lot of the book is about self-reflection and that process and what I find there. And even the fact that the reflection itself is wavy in the water. If that bird were to become still, then that reflection would be a perfect reflection of the wholeness of the swan. So that stillness helps me find that wholeness within myself. And then of course, there's also the fact that Gracie is in motion. And there she is. Thank you, Em. She's in motion. And for me, my definition of grace is love and motion, love and action. So all of those things made it really the perfect picture for the book. And yet that's not what I was looking for. It felt right. But then when I reflected on it, I really did see why it was the perfect picture for the book. So I'm gonna move into some of the other poems that are related to that self-reflection part and the grace that I find reflected in nature.
Lynda, might I just make one comment?
Of course.
One of the things that I liked about the poem Nudes was the vulnerability that's inherent in the nakedness of the trees. And seeing that in nature and seeing it everywhere else and in the world in many ways, I want to commend the vulnerability that Lynda brings to her writing, her willingness to just bear it all in the words that she brings into this world. And that's, I see that in the trees. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Well, you know, the trees are one of my greatest teachers. So there you have it. Since it is spring, I thought I would start with this, Alive. And this is one of my favorite birds to listen to as well. A catbird calls, melodic and sweet on the morning air. How do you explain the value of his song, of simply being present in the vastness of the universe, in this moment, to hear this particular song? It is an occurrence never to be repeated in all of time. It is a song that I may be the only human to hear. One tender, precious instance of life pouring forth in melody. Of course, no value can be assigned to being awake in this moment, to hearing my heart echo the catbird's sweet song, to the elation of being vibrantly, achingly alive on a spring morning. And so many of these poems are from moments of my life. That was a moment where I was in this very room, sitting in meditation and listening to the catbird sing. It very much informs everything that I write. the moments I spend in nature. And I learn so much through them. One of my greatest, the poet that I adore so much is Mary Oliver. And it broke my heart when she passed. And I did have an opportunity at one point to see her read her poems live, which was such a great joy, a reading between her and Billy Collins, which was incredible. It was so wonderful to see them together. And she and I share a love of swans in our poetry. And there was a moment that was so wonderful for me where I was reading one of her poems about swans, and she writes about watching them take off and wondering where they're going. And I remember reading that poem and thinking, they come here, Mary, they come here after they leave you. And it was such this, I just felt like she could hear me, even though she couldn't, obviously, but it was so wonderful to just feel that connection. And she inspires me so much. And this is a poem that shares a title with a poem of hers called Red Fox. And this, again, was a moment that happened one morning outside in our yard. I shared a moment with a red fox on a cold January morning. My breath made small clouds of mist as I stepped quietly outside at the sight of him. I had intended to shoo him away for fear of his intentions towards our cats. Instead, I paused, as did he, at the sound of the door. We both simply looked at each other, held the other's eyes from 20 feet away. It seemed like no distance at all in that moment. It felt as though a season passed. We ran and played and tumbled and hunted together at dusk and into the evening. That moment when our eyes met, I knew what it was to be a red fox. I wonder if he in return knew what it meant to be a human being. If he had to learn it from me, his lesson was incomplete, as I am always still learning, still exploring what it is to be human. Well, I'm certain that he knew what it was to be a red fox. As he trotted away after a moment or a season, pausing twice to look back at me over his shoulder, I knew in some unexplainable but certain way that we had both walked away with a gift that morning. It's hard for me to express my gratitude for those moments. And how deeply they touch me and how much I learned from them. And there's an essay in the book about this little turtle that I saw sitting by the river one day. I learned so much sitting by the Rappahannock River, but it looked like a little leaf tumbling in the water. And I watched it a little closer because the movement seemed odd. And it was this tiny, tiny turtle that was swimming so hard in the current. I'm like, I'm actually making the motions. It was swimming so hard and it would crawl up on the rock. And I watched it and it would rest there for a little while. And then it would throw itself right back in the water and swim against the current, trying to get upstream, and it wouldn't make any progress at all. And I was so torn about wanting to go down there and take that little turtle out of the water, put him on the rock and save him. But I realized in that moment that, maybe that's what he needed to make his little fins stronger, or, to learn a sense of direction or whatever it was. And that there's so many times in my own life where I want to pick myself up out of where I am and move myself someplace that I think is better. Or my children, for instance, when I'm worried about them. But sometimes you got to be where you are. And that turtle taught me that there are times where I have to just be a witness and just be there to see the struggle. And so that was another one of those amazing moments in nature for me that taught me so much just by watching. So that mindfulness of being present in nature, I'm so grateful for that practice. Speaking of your children and learning lessons about your children. This one is a lesson a juvenile eagle taught me when my daughter Lucy was going off to college one year. It's called Lesson from a Juvenile. And I won't look at you, so I won't cry, okay? A juvenile eagle flew over my head as soon as I arrived. As I neared the parking area, I stopped to watch a young deer, a buck with only the first tips of antlers showing. He was all alone. I watched for several minutes and no others were near. A baby all alone was what my eyes and heart saw. How does nature always know the lesson I most need to learn? She left for college today. I parked my car, not really sure why, and walked to the picnic area. I had thought it was about time to head home, but that still small voice led me here instead. I have the space to myself, and as I sit alone on the bench, say aloud, I don't know why I'm here. I enjoy being on my own with the birds, so I simply look out across Pope's Creek and ponder my question. As I let my eyes wander across the expanse of the creek, I see them. An eagle and an osprey engaged in a chase, almost as if they knew that was what would catch my attention. Well, the point isn't that far. Maybe I'll wander over since I'm here. Even from a fair distance, I hear the calling. Over and over, urgent and high-pitched, there is an osprey nest with at least 4 ospreys perched nearby, protesting at my approach. I pause a while, wishing I could interpret the advice she's giving her young. Is it the same advice all moms give when a threat nears? When I arrive at last at the point, I see eagles across the water. One breaks off as soon as I arrive and heads my way. As it nears, I can see it's a juvenile. It makes straight for me, soaring over my head as I smile up at it. Strong, capable, breathtaking, sure of its flight. No interpreter needed. I'm not crying, you're crying.
Love you.
Love you too, sweetie.
Lynda, yesterday when we were talking, you were sharing how the wisdom is not your wisdom, but wisdom coming from elsewhere. First, I think you're underestimating what you bring to this, but be that as it may, clearly nature is an inspiration for you, but where else does this sense of wisdom arise? And I know you also share that you're not really trying to fix anything, but just bring it forward. Can you kind of share how that works?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when I write, for me, writing is a meditation practice, really. It's a practice of being in that stillness, going into that stillness of writing and being open. It's listening. I refer to myself as a listener because that's what I try to do in everything that I do is really just listen. And so that's a practice of listening for me. And I honestly do believe that it's a listening to something beyond myself, or not beyond myself because it's part of myself, but deep within myself, and a wisdom that comes from a place that I would call divine. And there's so many times when I will start a poem with a question, with an exasperation, with sadness, with anger, with whatever it is I'm feeling, and at a loss for what to do, and just trust the words and where they come from. And they take me to a place that I never imagined. It's miraculous to me over and over again how often it happens that I will start with rage or I will start with sorrow and not any glimmer of light on the horizon. And by the end of the poem, there's light. There's a path at least forward, or there's just comfort in wherever I am that I didn't expect to find, that I wasn't looking for. I wasn't writing to seek out that answer. I was writing to just move through what I was feeling. And those words, I really honestly believe that they come through my heart and onto the page, and they're touched by something in my heart that is part of me and much wiser than me. And yeah, and teaches me, instructs me through the poems. And, you know, when I first started writing poetry, I had never written a poem before in my life before 2003. And it literally started happening overnight. And I would just share them with my friend Christine and nobody else because I didn't know what they were. They weren't poems to me because I'd never written a poem. And it took me a while before I realized that, yeah, they're for me and they teach me things, but then they also have things to offer to other people too. And so that the first leap into sharing was really hard. It was a real challenge because it is my heart on the page. And yet, you know, it's a joy on the other hand for me to share it too. There is a vulnerability to it, but it is such a joy to share those words and the journey they took me on. You know, I learned something, I gained an insight, and I'm excited to share that with other people, or just to know that someone else who's in the midst of their sorrow and grieving like I had been when I wrote it would, you know, it might help them through that moment of grief, or it might just be a companion for them during that moment of grief. So yeah, it's an amazing process for me, and one I never ever in my life imagined that I would be a poet.
Is there a poem that sort of epitomizes that process for you?
Yeah, I think,
You would be willing to share?
let me see if I have it here. The one that jumps to mind is Before. I wrote it in 2018 when I was in the midst of really struggling with all the political divisiveness and the way people were talking to each other, and how do I engage with people I disagree with, that I'm in relationship with, and that I disagree so vehemently with. You know, there were just some things that were fundamental that were really challenging for me. And I didn't know what to do. I was at my wit's end, and I just was at a loss for how to move forward. And so I sat down and I was in meditation, and I was thinking, so what do I do? How do I move forward from here? And the phrase that came to me is, you need to love people before you meet them. And I was like, what does that mean? And then I wrote this and then all of a sudden I knew what it meant, but it touched my heart. It blew my mind. It gave me this path that I didn't see. And I was so grateful for that path because it really helped me to move forward from there. So it's called Before. Before all of this, before all the anger and fear, disharmony and divisiveness, name calling and judgment, before all of this, you were just you, and I was just me, tiny sparks of life living before all of this. I must remember you before I met you, before I heard of you or read your tweet. I must remember you before I knew you, before any labels of other, different, or enemy could be applied and stick. I must remember you before all of this, when you were new to the world, simply love in expression, before all of this. If I can remember you then, before all of this, then I can love you before we meet. If I can love you before we meet, then I can find common ground, work peacefully for change, discuss rather than argue, heal and forgive, and love on after all of this. So for my sake and yours, and for all those yet to come, I will go back and love you before all of this, so that when we do meet and maybe disagree, I will already know how to love you through all of this. And I honestly never saw that ending coming, never saw those words coming. You know, it really helped me in that moment to be able to move forward peacefully and with love. There are portions of the book, a couple of chapters in particular, that are very difficult, that were difficult to write, that are difficult to be present with. There's a whole chapter on grief called The Alchemy of Loss. And there's a chapter about spiritual activism and social justice. I want to read a couple of those, but I want to preface it with, that they may be challenging for some people. And if you need to not listen, I can honor that. So feel free to, I don't know, leave and come back or walk away or whatever you need to do. I'll start with the ones about grief. Pam, I'm going to start with Grow the Good. I'm wearing the shirt. You can't see it, but I have it on. It's a poem that's inspired by a friend of many people here, Marcy Moore, who passed away earlier this year, and who gave me the shirt off her back. So I'm going to try and read it. It's called Grow the Good, and I have the t-shirt on that she gifted to me that says Grow the Good on it, that inspired the poem. Well, she inspired the poem, but you'll see. I'm going to breathe for a second. Grow the Good. A box arrived in the mail. A small rectangle the size of a videotape. Remember those? Folded neatly inside was a t-shirt, soft and sky blue, with the words Grow the Good surrounded by butterflies, and peace and wonder below on the pages of a book. As soon as I saw the box and the return address, I knew there would be so much more than just the t-shirt folded up inside. A gift from a friend who would give you the shirt off her back, and did just that before she moved on. The tears flowed as soon as I unfolded it, felt the soft fabric and held it to my cheek. I wept for myself, which I sometimes forget to do. What I didn't know was how the unfolding would continue. As I sit now, days later, I can hear the chainsaw buzzing. I know it's cutting through the limbs of the sour cherry tree beside the house. I went out to say my goodbyes before it began on this quiet, cold winter day. As I looked at her bark, so covered in lichen, and the branches that would bear no more fruit, I could feel the need for letting go when it is time. I could understand when someone is tired and ready to move on. They've spent their life energy and are weary of the fight to survive. No, they have done their work and are ready to let go. I knew the difficulty of being the one saying goodbye, the pain that there are no words for as you move between understanding the need to let go and the reality of letting go. There is a chasm there, which no amount of tears or words of love can fill. It simply has to be a chasm, empty and wide. So I stood with my heart against the cherry tree, tears spilling onto her trunk, and whispered, I love you. And let the ache be there, and let the tears flow, and let the anger rise alongside the guilt. Then I looked up among her branches and offered thanks for the beauty, the shade, the tart nourishment, the greenery and cascades of pink flowers every spring, the perch for my bird friends. I spoke my gratitude for all she had given me with joy in my heart, while at the same time lamenting how different the view from my window will be, how big the hole in the sky will be, how empty I will feel. Standing at the chasm, so like that small box, wondering how much it could hold. My heart, my grief, my love, my loss, my lessons to learn, my gratitude, my joy, my unfolding. A t-shirt now a treasure, a piece of wood now a canvas. I place them each gently within my heart, knowing how much it can hold. And move forward with the seeds they each planted there to grow the good. Pam, thank you for sharing her with all of us. Maybe we'll go with one that's not quite as hard about grief. One night, I mean, there are times when poems wake me in the middle of the night. I'm going to just stop for a second and just breathe. I think I'm not the only one who needs just to take a breath for a moment. So sometimes it wakes me in the middle of the night, poetry, or just a line or a phrase. I'm sure the other poets here know that experience. A line towards the end of this poem woke me in the middle of the night one night, and I didn't know why or what. I wasn't in the midst of grieving. But the next morning I wrote this poem, and I just found it so interesting, the perspective. It's called The Stages of Grief. They say there are stages of grief, as if in our grieving, we are actors in a play. If only there truly were a script to work from, so that when we reach the end of Act 3, the curtain falls and we exit stage right with our grief left behind upon the boards. Instead, we stumble from one stage to the next, blinded temporarily each time by the glaring spotlights that illuminate each. There are no cheers or standing ovations for our performances as functioning human being, as grieving friend, as heartbroken widow or widower, or inconsolable parent. There is only the absolute silence after the lights have dimmed and the crowds have gone home. The deafening, echoing silence of a voice we won't hear again, a laugh we would trade anything in the world to hear fill the house once more. What does the actor do when done with the stage? How do they leave the play behind, set aside the words, and move on to the next show? I find I remain frozen upon the stage. Lights dimmed, seats empty. Words fallen silent, at a loss for anything to say that can heal or revive. I do the only thing left to me. I sit on the edge of the stage, feet dangling, swinging. My feet, at least, free of the stage. So I let them swing, reveling in the feeling of even a small part of me being free, and ignoring the twinge of guilt that sense of freedom brings. Suddenly, a spotlight springs to life, illuminating a circle behind me. There, within a crisp, clear, perfectly formed circle of light, stands my grief. My cry of anguish the moment I heard the news. Each tear I shed, each truth I denied, each shout aimed at the sky and at you. Each fear I wouldn't utter or face. Each moment of aching loneliness. Each moment of complete confusion about what to do next and how to go on, even each thought of not going on. But also each joyful memory of love and laughter shared, all gathered together in that beam of light. My loss taken form at the end of an unscripted Act 4. No soliloquy, no accolades, no stellar reviews. Just my grief revealed in the light, revealing also grief has a life of its own. Finally, I leave the stage. So it was that line, grief has a life of its own, that woke me in the middle of the night. I don't know where it came from. It was a strange moment, waking to that phrase. I want to pause and see if there's any questions or reflections that anybody wants to share. I know we haven't done that yet. Maybe it's an awkward spot to do that, but. Yes, I do wonder that sometimes, how much our hearts can hold. Sometimes I don't think we know until we have to hold more. Some days, yes, they are too heavy for me because they, I feel like there's only so much my heart can hold. And then the words show me a way to expand it a little more. Though have been times in writing where I said no, and I set it aside. There was a story in particular called Maria that I started writing. It's the strangest experience. I'll try to keep it short. I was in a classroom where I worked, and I was looking at a book a boy had brought back from a trip to Poland. That he was from Poland and he'd gone on one of the breaks. And I was flipping through it, and I stopped on a page that was a picture of a train track going off into the distance. And all of a sudden, I was on a train, and I could smell, and I could hear, and I could feel. And I was in the middle of the classroom, and I couldn't breathe. I had no idea what was going on. And I was like, okay, so I need to be back in the classroom now because I can't just be wherever this wants me to be. And I came back to the moment and looked at the picture, and it was the train tracks leading to one of the concentration camps. And I knew that it was a story that wanted to be written. And I started writing it at some point after that. And I could tell where the story was going. And I was like, no, I'm not willing to do that, to write that. And then eventually I did go back and write the rest of the story. It was really hard. And that was one of the hardest ones to write. And it was beautiful in a way. There was a great beauty to it. And I don't think it would have come to me if there hadn't been a healing element to it. But yeah, it was really hard to write. Though I do believe that if I can't do it, or if I'm not willing to do it, that it will find someone else to write it. So there's, yeah, I don't know.
A follow-up question to that.
Oh yeah, what?
So is your poetry like a vent then?
Like a vent. I consider myself an empath, an empathetic person. And a lot of times in the writing, it's the energy of something in the collective that needs to move through me. And so in that case, yeah, it is like that. I am like a passage that it moves through. I had to learn that process. And it was hard at the beginning because I had to learn to not let it attach to me. Whatever that emotion was that was moving through, if I let it attach to me, that was really harmful for me. And so I had to learn to allow it to just move through me, which isn't a comfortable process by any means. And poor Bill has had to witness that more times than he would like. But so in that case, in some instances, yes, it's absolutely like that, where I'm just this passageway for it to move through. That doesn't always lead to writing. That sometimes is just moving energy. But yes, sometimes the writing is too. Like the story about Maria, that had no connection to my physical life, that story. It was as if someone showed up with a story they wanted to tell. And a lot of my writing feels that way, like taking dictation, listening to somebody else's story. I wrote a whole novel that way that felt like somebody would just came and sat behind me and told me their story, and I wrote it all down. So yeah, a lot of times it's like that. And then other times it's a lesson for me. But there's always a lesson in it for me at some point. There's one that I really wanted to read because for me it was a really powerful experience. And I think that for women, it speaks a lot to women because of the images we see all the time and that we're bombarded with, and the ideas of beauty that we face. I'll just read it. It's called 4 Words. And it came from an experience that I did have. I never feel beautiful. Said so quietly, so vulnerably, I almost missed it. 4 words. 4 words from a beautiful woman who doesn't see her own beauty. 4 words that make me want to weep, that enrage me, that break my heart for every girl who's ever thought them. 4 words that echo back to me my own self-doubt. 4 words that stop me in my tracks and leave me standing, looking in the face of a woman beautiful in every way, without 4 words to offer in response that will help her see for herself what I see. After all, what power can words have over every image she's ever seen of airbrushed, photoshopped beauty? Every image of unattainable perfection, attained only through clever lighting, makeup, scalpels, or just the right body cinching undergarments. What words can I offer to erase each one she has spoken to herself? If I hadn't spoken those very same 4 words myself, then maybe I would know what to say in the face of such beauty and such doubt. I don't have the words to heal the wounds, but I have 2 eyes and a heart that see her clearly. Yet my heart doesn't call me to respond with trite words of reassurance, but to say instead, when you were born, beauty took form as you. Your beauty deepens with each smile. Your beauty deepens with each kindness, with each loving word, with each gentle touch, with each gift of your time, with each sharing of grief or laughter. With each expression of love, another layer of beauty settles upon you, like the morning dew upon the flower. You needn't concern yourself with feeling beautiful, my friend. Beauty rejoices as you. 4 words. That was another one that started from, a place of frustration and sadness, and I didn't see the ending until it happened. That's why I love trusting those words. It's amazing. Oh, thank you, Amy.
Lynda, you talked a little bit about the cover photo earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to say anything about the actual title of the book? About how you came or settled upon Grace Reflected?
Yeah. Well, there's a poem in the collection with the same title. But grace for me is a really important aspect of my life, important energy in my life. I, for a long time, really thought about it because I looked for definitions of the word grace and never found one that made sense to me. I hate the phrase, and I don't like to use the word hate. There, but for the grace of God go I. Drives me crazy. Like God would be, you get grace, but not you over there. I hated that. That never felt right to me. And so I changed it around to there, but for I go the grace of God, meaning that I'm a source of grace in the world and I'm the only one stopping it from flowing. And that made sense to me, that we each have this reservoir of grace that we can share with the world. But I still needed to find out what grace meant to me. And, through meditation and writing and all these things, I finally came to my own definition of grace, which is that grace is love in action. And that felt right to me, that, love set forth through my heart in motion into the world. That's grace. And so ever since then, it's been an energy that I work with, that Gracie symbolizes for me, that's really important to me. When I have a difficult conversation I need to have, or anything that's really challenging, I will call on Grace and say, give me the words and give me the opportunity, and I will speak them. So it's a really important aspect of my life that I try to keep at the forefront of my life. Putting love in motion in the world is, love is the most important thing to me. So a way to put that into motion in the world. And Pamela was there for the very first A Day of Grace. It became an event that we held called A Day of Grace. I was so wrapped up in the idea of grace. So yeah, it's something really, really important for me. And found its way into the poems. There are several about swans too. There was a one request that I want to make sure I honor, and I think my friend Vicky requested it too, as well as Jean. It's called Packing for the Journey. This one was one of those moments where I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. While I was writing, it was very interesting. So yeah, Packing for the Journey. What if the past is a backpack that I put on each day? And each morning when I rise, I choose what I will carry forward with me. What if I imagine that each memory, each moment of my past, weighed the same, traumas and celebrations alike? If today is a journey I'm about to embark upon, what do I pack? I look to the journey of this day and sort through what I have laid out. I pack memories that will keep me warm. I pack the map of lessons learned to help me find the best route forward. I pack the knowing of those in my life who will walk beside me. I pack the wisdom of my ancestors and my love for those I have lost. I pack my circle of friends like a life preserver I always have if needed. I pack moments of joy and laughter as a reminder that sorrow has a companion. I pack insights gained to use as a cushion for moments of quiet reflection. I pack the love I have received as a gift I know I can now give to others along the way. Pausing, I find that my bag is nearly full. If I really wanted to, I could squeeze in hurt feelings or that grudge I've been carrying. However, there doesn't seem to be room for that person I've been choosing not to forgive. No, or that disagreement that I didn't want to let go of. Maybe I can squeeze that one in. Or better yet, I could leave a little space in my pack for growth and begin the journey of today a little lighter than the day before, not weighed down by the past. That was like a revelation to me that I could choose each day to not carry all that heavy stuff with me if I didn't want to. I know that there are certain traumas that happen in our life that is not, can't just set down quite that easily. But it was really a revelation to think that I can choose each day when I begin what I want to consciously pick up and take with me. And being from Jersey, you know, it's hard to do that without the grudges, but I'm working on it.
So there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
As we have been with you as witness to the launch of this collection of intimate and vulnerable poems, what can we all do to support the life of this meaningful work?
Thank you. Share it with others. Absolutely. Buy a copy for a friend or a loved one. Find someone to read it aloud with. I think poetry should be read aloud. There's more power to it for me when you speak it. Share it on social media with other people that you know that might be interested. One of the big things that would help is to write a review. If you enjoy the book, write a review on wherever you bought it from. So other people that don't know me will have a clue as to what it's about and why it spoke to you. All of those things will really help. Thank you for asking. Shout it from the rooftops. Oh gosh, wow, that went fast. All right, we do have to do one. I'm not going to be able to do the really long one, but I do want to do one from the social justice aspect, because speaking of shouting from the rooftops, right, it's something that using my voice is really important to me, not just to talk about nature and personal reflection and spirituality, which are all important to me, but also to use my voice to lift the voices of other people, to shine a light on something that I think is unjust, and a lot of times it's to process the pain I'm feeling in the face of violence in our society, and to bear witness for other people. And that's really important to me. Spiritual activism is something that's really important to me that I've thought about a lot, and how to approach all of that from a place that's still loving instead of just the anger that I feel. This one was a poem. I'm going to warn you that this one deals with sexual violence. It's called I Will Not Be Quiet. I wrote it in response to the article in Rolling Stone that happened about the attack on the campus at University of Virginia, where my daughter was a student at the time. So it was very close to my heart, that story, even if the story in the magazine may not have been completely accurate. It brought forth a lot of other stories of things that had happened to women that were similar. And so this was my reaction to that, because it was so close to my heart at that time. Always is, obviously. And there's one thing too about this section. There are certain poems in the section that have a reference in the notes part of the book. This is one of them, where there's information about sexual violence and how to get help and things like that. So the poems that are about some of the mass shootings that have happened, at the end of the book, there's a list of the people who were killed in those shootings, in those incidents. There's a poem about lynching, and there's some information at the end about lynching in the United States. So I wanted to be able to offer more information for some of the poems in this section. So this is called I Will Not Be Quiet. I will not be quiet. I will keep shouting. They are all our daughters, everyone. Each girl that is raped on a college campus in Virginia, or on a bus in India, or as an act of war in Africa, or in her home by a relative, or by a professional athlete, or by a teacher, or by a celebrity. Every one of them, they are all our daughters. Shaking our heads and being angry will not suffice. I will not be quiet. My voice will be raised in opposition. My voice will be raised for safety. My voice will be raised for justice. My voice will be raised for respect. My voice will be raised for education. My voice will be raised for solidarity. My voice will be raised for peace. But make no mistake, my voice will be raised. I will not be quiet to protect your reputation. I will not be quiet to protect your good name. I will not be quiet while you sweep it under the rug. I will not be quiet while you look the other way. When you look the other way, you will find me standing there. When you pick up your broom, I will take away the rug. When you speak your good name, I will speak truth. When you look to your reputation, I will hold up a mirror. I will not be quiet. Our daughters deserve better, and they are all our daughters. There was a part of me that struggled with putting some of those poems in the book, especially in a book called Grace Reflected, right? Poems about lynching, poems about mass shootings, poems about George Floyd. And yet grace, I think, is fierce. Love, I know, can be fierce. That's part of why the swan in that position was so important to me, because she's fierce. Love can be fierce and strong and still love. And so I knew they needed to be included with the collection, because it was important for love to be strong and to speak loudly when necessary. So that was really important to me. I know we only have time for like one more. Does anybody have any questions or anything before we finish up? Oh, okay. Let's see. I think because of the time, I'm actually going to do a shorter one. Gina was going to do How to Be in the World, but I think it might be too long. So I'm going to end with Sacred Text. This one just made me think. From your first breath to your last, each blink of your eyes, each word spoken, whispered, or shouted, each action taken, each kindness offered or withheld, each choice made, each moment of love or moment of hate, each thought, each hug, each kiss, part of the sacred text of your life. What if, upon your last breath, that book is complete and placed in the library of time for others to read? If you knew each insignificant thing you did was sacred, was written with care and delicate script, in an eternal tome meant to guide others, would you write your story differently? Would you pause now and then to consider the scribe capturing each moment? Each second is a new letter. Every moment is the birth of a new word. Thoughts develop into sentences, actions into paragraphs. Your life speaks volumes.
Great one to end on.
Thank you. I'm so glad you all were able to join me. Thank you so much. It means so much to me for you to be here. Thank you.
Remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Truly powerful, girl.
Thank you. Thank you.